Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you've had a productive day, and I wish you all a restful weekend ahead. Let's begin today's video with US-China developments. This week, US President Biden sat for an interview about foreign policy with US-based Time magazine, where he expressed a very bleak outlook for China and its economy. The soundbite getting the most attention is, quote, "Everybody talks about how strong China is and how powerful they are. But you've got a population that's considerably older than the vast majority of the youth in Europe that is too old to work, and they are xenophobic. Where is it coming from? Where is it going to grow? You've got an economy that's on the brink there. You've got an economy on the brink. The idea that their economy is booming? Give me a break." End quote. He also once again used his line about no one wanting to trade places with Xi Jinping because China has so many problems. It's unclear whether it's his security team, intelligence team, or economic team that is giving him this evaluation of the Chinese economy. Perhaps the US leader has information or is privy to information that isn't available in public. But if not, his comments could be concerning. If viewers will permit me to give my personal opinion for a moment, we know that China's economy is in trouble. It's going through a painful transition and likely faces a long period of much slower growth. However, to say that the economy is on the brink or facing collapse is, I would argue, likely inaccurate. And if the US administration is making decisions based on this assumption, then it may result in strategic mistakes. Even with a shrinking population and slowing, even stagnating economy, the PRC presents the US and her allies with their biggest great power competition since the Cold War. And indeed, history teaches us that a great power in relative decline can be more dangerous for rivals than a confident rising one. Now, Biden's comments on Taiwan were also noteworthy. These appear to reiterate strategic ambiguity. We note these here. The interviewer asked the question, quote, "CIA Director Bill Burns says President Xi Jinping of China has ordered the Chinese military to be ready by 2027 to conduct a successful invasion of Taiwan. You said on multiple occasions that you would use US forces to defend Taiwan. What does that mean? Is it boots on the ground? What shape would that take?" End quote. As an aside, several Chinese in China have told me that they believe that if an invasion was to take place, it would be in 2027. This is Biden's response. Quote, "It would depend on the circumstances. You know, by the way, I've made clear to Xi Jinping that we signaled on to previous presidents going way back to the policy of that it is we are not seeking independence for Taiwan, nor will we in fact not defend Taiwan if China unilaterally tries to change the status. And so we're continuing to supply capacity and we've been in consultation with our allies in the region." End quote. Question. So, if I might, not ruling out the possibility of deploying US troops to Taiwan in the case of an invasion? Biden. Not ruling out using US military forces. That's a distinction between deploying on the ground, air power and naval power, etc. Question. So you're maybe striking from bases in Philippines or Japan? Is that Biden? I can't get into that. You would then criticize me with good reason if I were to tell you. Meanwhile, other US officials have been making strong statements this week too. US Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, this week accused China of taking its domestic economic problems and exporting them to the rest of the world, expressing, quote, "China is not going to win the Good Neighbor Award. There's nobody in the neighborhood that China is not having some type of either economic or strategic challenge with." End quote. Biden's science advisor, Arati Prabhakar, the first top White House technology official to hail from a defense background since the Cold War, has come forward as a firm hardliner on China. US-based The Washington Post reports this week that her team at the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy now, quote, "is tasked with thorny questions of how to accelerate US innovation in technologies with military applications, semiconductors, telecommunications, and quantum computing, while curbing US research connections to China without veering into racial profiling." End quote. Her team is drafting research security guidelines for universities across the nation on how they should limit and monitor research relationships with China and other countries deemed adversaries. This week too saw US Department of State publish a statement on the Tiananmen anniversary this week. Quote, On the 35th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, we remember the tens of thousands of peaceful Chinese pro-democracy protesters who were brutally assaulted for standing up for freedom, human rights, and an end to corruption. As Beijing attempts to suppress the memory of June 4th, the United States stands in solidarity with those who continue the struggle for human rights and individual freedom. The courage and sacrifice of the people who stood up in Tiananmen Square 35 years ago will not be forgotten." End quote. In a sign of the current relationship, the statement was much more forceful than the much watered-down and shorter statement published for the 34th anniversary last year. Next up, rural governance issues rear their ugly heads. If you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, it's a huge help if you can hit the like button. 45% of regular viewers are not subscribed, and subscribing is actually a huge help as well. They're just 2 clicks of the button, but a huge help, and sharing too is one of the best ways to help this channel grow. 2 recent developments in the countryside, which have blown up international stories, have come to highlight the difficulties of local governance for China. Both are cases of local officials making embarrassing statements in the face of a public safety incident. Being ridiculed by the Chinese internet, these cases have been held up as examples of bad attitudes, incompetence, and corruption at the local level, especially in poorer rural regions. It is argued too that they are symptoms of a wider systemic problem, not examples of just bad apples. In May, there was a minor pollution incident in a small river in Anhui. A large number of dead fish and shrimp appeared in the Nanjing Pukou section of the Zhuhe River, a primary tributary on the left bank of the lower Yangtze River. Central state media went to the area to ask local officials how this had happened and what they were doing about the issue. One official, when defending why he didn't test the water, said, quote, "Drinking Maotai," this is a style of baijiu, an alcoholic beverage, "can also kill people. After someone dies from drinking Maotai, is it necessary to do a toxicity analysis on Maotai?" End quote. A second official, incredibly, frankly told the Central State Media reporter, quote, "I have only 2 months left until retirement. I shouldn't be asking too much about these things." End quote. A few days later, the Anhui Provincial Party Committee held a special meeting to arrange pollution control and accountability work. The meeting pointed out that the Zhuhe River water pollution incident, quote, "is a major ecological and environmental damage incident with very serious consequences and very bad nature. This incident could have been avoided. Some cadres acted recklessly during the handling process, covering up problems and trying to muddle through, causing a small matter to drag into a big one, and a big matter to explode. Some cadres spoke without thinking during media interviews, causing a bad impression." End quote. That's certainly one way to put it. The 2 officials both lost their jobs. Meanwhile, last week, a sociology student from Wuhan University gave a telling interview with Sanlian Life Weekly about her recent research in her rural hometown in Hubei province. I want to end today's video by examining some of the points made in her interview, which we are now quoting selected excerpts of, in translation, of course, directly. The most surprising change was that out of the 4 village officials, 3 were young people born in the 1990s. She found the same situation in the township government. After taking office, these young officials faced an increasingly large and floating township system, and they were confused by the unrealistic work they had to do. Young officials have arrived, but whether villagers recognize them is another issue. In the past, officials gained prestige in the village by constantly helping villagers with their daily affairs. Now, many young township officials are university graduates, selected for their positions. Their goal is not to stay in the village, and most live in the county. They may lack basic rural knowledge and do not spend time in the fields or integrate with the villagers, making it difficult to accumulate rural experience. The toilet revolution in rural areas in recent years is similar. The goal is to replace outdoor pit toilets with indoor toilets. However, during our visits last year, we found that the newly built public toilets in the villages were rarely used and had low utilization rates. Some village officials told us that due to a lack of personnel to manage and clean the public toilets, they were often locked to avoid the hassle of cleaning and potential mess. To use an analogy, the relationship between grassroots officials and rural society used to be like fish and water, inseparable. Now it has become like oil and water. with grassroots officials floating on the surface, busy with many tasks, but unable to integrate deeply. Here ends the direct quote in today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Friday, have a restful and good weekend, and I will see you all tomorrow.